society group that has joined us. And actually, it's due to the president of that group, Sam Brown, that built a bridge for me to Reverend Moore. So there's a strong connection here. And I think we're going to have a great discussion. We have had several conversations together, Reverend Moore and I, and the panelists. And I have greatly enjoyed my interaction with him. And he's got a lot to say and tell us about. I'd like to just give you a little brief bio on Reverend Moore. He's presided over the San Jose Silicon Valley NAACP for the past 7 years. He has extensive training in diversity and multiculturalism. As a fitting conclusion to Black History Month this month, he'll be sharing with us his experience as a person involved in pursuing justice for all members of society. He is eminently qualified to speak on this subject with an impressive and long list of organizations and groups that he has committed his time and energy to. Reverend Moore has seen firsthand the problems of injustice and bias that still haunt our country. He sees the positive side of things, and he has a personal mission statement, which is, if you see an injustice, you should step up and speak out for justice. Many others have paid the price for our comfort. We must do our part. Freedom is not free. So I'm going to turn it over in 1 second to Reverend Moore, and as the moderator, I may interject myself with some questions as we go through the presentation. But as Diane mentioned, we'll definitely be allowing time for questions and answers. So take it away, Reverend Moore.
Yes, and thank you. And greetings in the mighty and awesome name of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. God is our great God who continues to show himself faithful. And I pray that you are well and blessed in him. It is with immense pleasure that I extend a warm thank you to the Villages Democratic Club and the MLK Group for inviting me. First, let me encourage you to be grateful, careful, not fearful. Be fruitful. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, for God hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. The year 2020 brought many challenges to all of our families and friends. The pandemics of racism and COVID-19 has turned our world upside down. We have marched for justice, for the lives of the lost at the hands of police and the hands of this country's leadership. For more than 100 years, the NAACP has stood sentinel against racism and hate violence in the United States. It is the most that we know that we have a moral obligation summarized in our nation's Pledge of Allegiance to oppose those who seek to tear the United States apart by espousing hatred or calling for violence against any group in this country. Today, we find ourselves amid both a global pandemic as well as a national political pandemic, remembering the past to live, the present, and shape the future. There's currently active presence of racism in American political discourse, and there's a very real threat of moving backwards if we do not stand up and speak out. A great man once warned, the only thing necessary for triumph of evil is for good men and women to do nothing. That is why we will continue to fight for hope and not hate. This is a critical time in the history of this country. We must work to restore the checks and balances for our democratic country we all can be proud of to call home. Jonathan Witham said years ago about this nation's moral focus in his city's Sermon on the Hill, we must uphold the familiar commerce together in all meekness, gentleness, patience, and liberty. We must delight in each other, make others' conditions our own, rejoice together, mourn together, labor and suffer together, having always before our eyes our commission and community and the work as members of the same body. So shall we keep the unity of faith and spirit in a bond of peace. In 1908, the deadly race riots rocketed Springfield, Illinois, the resting place of Abraham Lincoln. That is what birthed the NAACP. Along with concluding liberals that included Mary Overton, Oswald Villard, both descendants of famous abolitionists, William English Walling and Dr. Henry Moskowitz, issued a call for a meeting to discuss racial justice. Some 60 people, 7 of whom were African Americans, including W.D. Boyce and Ida B. Wells and Mary Churchill Terrell, signed the call, which was released on the centennial of Lincoln's birth. Echoing the famous Du Bois Niagara movement for civil rights, which began in 1905, the NAACP aims to secure for all people the rights guaranteed in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments of the United States Constitution, which promise to end slavery, the equal protection of the law, and universal adult male suffrages, respectively. According to the NAACP mission, was to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of minority groups and citizens of the United States, and to eliminate race prejudice. We seek to remove all barriers of racial discriminations in a democratic process. History says that, I want to quote Maya Angelou here. She says, history, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but faced. With courage, it need not be lived again. So I'm going to quote from Jay-Z. He said, blindfolded, expected to walk straight in line, mind-molded, taught to love you and hate mine. That's why you will often hear me say, I'm unapologetically Black and unapologetically beautiful. If you live in the system of white supremacy, you are either fighting the system or you are complicit. There is no neutrality to be had towards systems of injustice. It's not just something you can just opt out of. So those who say they love God and they hate their brothers or sisters are liars, for those who do not love a brother or sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. And Whitney Young says, we create an environment where it is all right to hate, to steal, to cheat, and to lie if we dress it up with symbols of respectability, dignity, and love. One of my white clergy comrades asked me, why does the Black church or why do Black people celebrate Black history? My answer has been a little more than bargained for, I think. I said, if not the Black people, if not the Black church, who? Who will tear the covers off of white supremacy society to expose the provisional promises of a nation built on domination, fascism, and restraint? If not the Black church of the people, who will preserve the selfless and the soulful expression of the Black worship experience, fashioned by African tribal theology and masterfully completed by the blood of a risen Savior? If not the Black church of the Black people, who will indelibly imprint on our nation the compulsory command of Christ for universal inclusiveness and fairness with a bold, broad stroke and unfettered unity for all men? If not the Black church, who will preserve with passion, persistence, the dreadful, indispensable image of hope for a sinful place? If not the Black church, who will be the storehouse for truth to keep alive the sordid facts of our painful past and problematic present? If not the Black church, who will express our gratitude for the sacrifice of our ancestors who brought us through the turbulent times of this life by tolls and by tears in the fields? If not the Black church, who will constantly preach a message of equality and hope for all people of color? Will you? And you guess, you could tell by a little surprise, he didn't know what to say. And that's the problem with America. America prefers to turn a deaf ear to its tainted past and present, at least when it comes to African Americans. Our nation as yet has not the strong collective desire to correct the disparities in an unjust society that has allowed us to be crouched in prejudice and dispensed upon a selective discretion. America grants freedom based on its internalized prejudice, and it is the very prejudice that has birthed the NAACP and the Black Lives Matter movement. What else can you call it? Life shells out 2 sets of rules, one for us and one for them. The only thing that surprises our nation is that it took this long for Black Lives Matter movement to surface, and the media is anxious to fill 24 hours of news. It is more willing to give the movement its much needed platform. We need the media to highlight the continuing injustice of sentences imposed on Black crimes similar to white crimes. We need the media to expose the burning hatred carried in the hearts of too many law enforcement. There are real values and such as this, so we must take time to understand in America and only admit when we're wrong can we move to deal or to heal or to correct the present injustice. After the Holocaust, Germany compensated its Jewish survivors. The United States recently compensated the Japanese Americans held in prison camps and the native and indigenous people for their land. But yet America has yet to acknowledge the wrongs of slavery. The 13th and 14th and 15th Amendments were enacted to put African Americans on equal footing with white citizens. But where is the acknowledgement of slavery as a wrongful act against a race of people? The 19th and 20th century civil rights legislation aimed to enforce the Civil War amendments and eliminate continued racism, but nowhere in any of these statutes an official apology was ever given. Some individuals, governments, and officials in states have acknowledged wrongs of the past, but overall, America has not. There is still a great psychological wound that remains unhealed and haunts this nation's consciousness still to this day. American history has long been ambiguous interpretation. We needed slavery, but we ended it. Now, a number of books and articles on it are currently out here pending. And I want to talk one about AC3. There shall be no slave in this state, nor involuntary servitude, unless punishable by crimes, shall ever be tolerated in this state. So we need to remove this, is what's in our Constitution saying slavery in the state of California still exists. Again, so AC3 means let's take it out. And some of us will say, why would we take it out? There's a conservative state such as Utah, Colorado, and Nebraska, all have amended their constitution to remove the clause. Considering our diversity and progressive values, there is no reason California should not join in removing that clause out of its constitution. And rejecting this democratic process, we have to be real careful, because we recently got elected President Biden into office. But right away, he says that he wants to renege on the $50K debt removal for people who went to Harvard and Yale and Penn. But wow, he no longer sounds like the candidate that we all just supported. We need to remove it from all of those colleges. Maybe not the top 20 elite schools, but all the schools under that. We need to remove Penn, Yale, and those parents affording to pay those students or can afford to pay to get those kids to school. It's unnegotiable to not talk to us about racial equality. We know that Republicans are doing it right now. The Voting Rights Act is under attack nationwide as states pass voter suppression laws. These laws lead to significant burdens of eligible voters trying to exercise their fundamental constitutional right to vote. We must get these measures passed. The Democratic Party, there's nothing that we can play with on these issues, or we will see that man back in the White House. We must get these laws passed. The measurable includes they're trying to cut early voting, voter ID laws, and purge the voting polls. We must enact the voting rights bill immediately. We must expand health care. The need for child credit acts is a must and is unnegotiable. And we need to be putting pressure on the two senators, Democratic senators in Arizona and Montana, to pass this act. These things aren't something the Democratic Party can negotiate. It is unnegotiable. A $15 minimum wage. 55% of the low wage earners voted for the Democratic ticket. And if we are not careful, those people will turn right back on us, and you'll see the same thing we just dealt with. So it's not negotiable for our party, because I am a Democrat, for you to negotiate this out. So those senators sitting on the fence, we need to do whatever we have to do to pull them back and tell them this will pass. And we must deal with systemic racism. Nowhere can we allow systemic racism to exist. On February 11th, 2020, what was her name? Leisha Brooks from she testified on the Southern Poverty Law Center, testified before the U.S. House Subcommittee on Military Personnel and the U.S. Armed Service Committee about the alarming growth of infiltration of the U.S. military by white supremacists. Whereas in December 2019, it was reported that the National Defense Authorization Act was altered in the U.S. Senate to remove mention of white nationalists in the screening process for national enlistees. Whereas now that they've changed it, they knew then in 2019 that white nationalists would join in the military to only come out and learn how to be better at taking down military installations, and which we've seen on January 16. We must support the CLEAR Act, sponsored by Ash Carter, which would eliminate police and check police records for affiliation and association with known hate groups. The Democratic Party's challenges must stay engaged with this community. It's a famous saying that truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, yet the scaffold will sway the future, and behind the dim unknown, stand of God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. James Russell said that, and we need to be mindful as a party on what we're going to do. So I want to share my screen now. I want to show you at where we're at here in San Jose and some of the work we're doing. Between the protests, beyond the works, doing the justice. It's time for us to do the justice and for you to join us in doing so. It comes as no great shock around the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to discover that the flag which you have pledged allegiance along with everybody else has not pledged allegiance to you. And as an African-American and Black man, it is so understanding that when we see this flag, and everyone was upset with that kneeling, it's hard when we go through these classes in schools knowing that the two sets of rules. We love America. Many of us have sacrificed for America, but often America has not loved us back. So we seek justice and equality for all Black and Indigenous people. Black Lives Matter. Let's get this clear. Black Lives Matter movement is unapologetically Black and affirming the values of Black lives, while its activists also remain committed to diversity and globalism. With their involvement, Black Lives Matter is a queer affirming organization guided by the fact all Black lives matter, regardless of actual or perceived sexuality identity, gender expression, economic status, ability, disability, religious beliefs or disbeliefs, immigration status or location. Black Lives Matter. The guiding principles include empathy, loving engagement, intergenerational participation, and support for Black families and Black villages of collective care. So it's much more than just words. And nowhere in that word do you see anything about being hostile or a direct threat to our form of democratic governance. It's just love and what we can show for everybody. And that's what we're called to do. Wow. Now, when we talk about white supremacy and military infiltration of policing across this United States, I want you to very clear, as we sat here and saw what happened on January 6th, Jacob Chancellor stormed the U.S. Capitol and was moved to a Virginia jail so correction officials could provide him with organic food. Yet, Terrell Thomas died of dehydration after prison guards cut off water to his cell for 7 days at the Milwaukee County Jail. There are two justice systems in America. And as a democratic state, California, you must do better because some of this disproportionality is here and is happening underneath your watch and underneath your time. The modernization of the criminal justice system has been slow to respond because we as Democrats leading this country have not led this state to a clear and present path. And so I just really want to focus on that. This just happened. One thing the San Jose, Silicon Valley, and NAACP is focusing on, and what we really want to see done, was the project to install a memorial of Japanese American internment at San Jose State University. It happened right here in San Jose State at the men's gym, yet there is not one thing that signifies that post. We should all be, as a Democratic Party, putting pressure on our Democratic leaders to set up some type of memorial at the man's gym location and put it up there and say, never again will we allow this to happen in this state or in this country, separating families or putting kids in the cages. We should be standing up and be totally outraged behind this. Another thing that the San Jose branch is working on is we're working on a mural, says the greatest glory lies in not in never failing, but in rising every time we fall. And we want to put a memorial of this type up on the reentry center that will be welcoming everybody that comes back out of the unjust prison system, which I just showed to you, that so many times Black people are charged, or Latino people are charged, or people of color are charged with greater crimes for that. And so they can't even get jobs. And everyone said they're complaining about the homeless, you're complaining about this, that, and the other. All we have to do is take the money from the criminal justice system and put them in other programs. And when we say defund the police, I don't mean defund the police, repurpose the funding over to social programs, education programs, and mental health services, even get response units that are come from that budget and put over there, not taken away. Demilitarize them. They do not need all those military weapons to handle us. And when they do have events that does call from that, there's other ways we can call out a guard or whatever to work with that. Second, when we talk about rehealing and changing the rules, that the wounds that America has inflicted on us, we have to look at once. Want to let you know there is a Museum of Bible in Washington, D.C., and the National Museum of Catholic Art and History in Washington, D.C. Or we can take Father Junior Facero and we can move him from the rotunda inside the Senate, move him because we understand that his genocidal policies of putting Native Americans on reservation and forcing them to build Catholic missions from an estimated 300,000 coastal Indians. He was brutalized and he was miswrongly treated them. Even if you pay attention, those of us who have been here for a long time, we will see that Sierra Way that used to be on Stanford University is no longer there. They renamed it. They took the name away because we understand the punishment that he did. So there is a place we can place this statue. And what we are suggesting is that California put a new statue in there, and California was named after Queen Caliph. Historians from the say that a Spanish writer by the name of Garcia Rodriguez wrote a widely popular novel of his time in the 1500s, where he said there was an island east of Asia. So that's always interesting. So they knew about Africa and they had experienced Africa. So this is a Black woman. This is somebody of color, a Black person that would be that's very neutral. You can't find anything slanderous about her or anything that would be detrimental to this state, and possibly replace her in the rotunda as a figure and understanding why California was named. Obviously, the presumption from me on this is that they were multicultural people who were writing this from the beginning. Here in Santa Clara County, we need to do a better job of recognizing and remembering the Loni Alvisa. Recently, the mayor, Sam Liccardo, we should be putting pressure, as he has said, and I don't know how many of you guys are fans of Sam. I'm not much of a fan because a year ago when we were trying to move out Christopher Columbus from the city hall, he said, according to his Italian heritage, he didn't want to move it because of his Italian heritage. And then here recently, he said he claimed his Latino heritage and then said that he wanted to move the Fallon statue. But this is after May 29th. And so it's funny how you see a politician jump from one side to another. We need people who want to make this a community that's inclusive of all, because the point is to be more inclusive. So my suggestion, or the branch's suggestion, is that we put statues that would represent the Ohlone Native as where the fallen statues are, build that as a representation of us as an inclusive community. Next, I really want your help, and we need your help, HR 40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparations for the African Americans Act. It is we as citizens, as democratic citizens, we cannot deny the history of this country. After 250 years of slavery, free labor, and 90 years of Jim Crow, where they took land, they did everything, 60 years of separate but unequal, 35 years of state-sanctioned redlining, even up here to 2008, until we reckon with the compounding moral depths of our ancestors, America will never be made whole. There is a very simple case for reparations. This democratic state should, without hesitance, without plausible cause, immediately support it, because here I am a victim of the 2008 when Bank of America gave me the loan that said I could have. I didn't have any better. They took my home. And for 12, 13 years now, I've been a renter, and it has wrecked me. It wrecked me when they said I was I was able to pay my note, and until I got in trouble, I couldn't. I had a 401k. I pulled my 401k and put it on my house. And then after that was gone, they said, well, now that you're behind on your mortgage, now your credit score is too low to get a loan. I then had to give up my house. And to this day, I have still not owned another home. I know Kamala did whatever, and that was a $2,000 check that I got that didn't even halfway replace the taxes that I had to pay for withdrawing my 401k to try to keep my home. Once, I also want to invite you to come out and enjoy on Thursday night, Judge Henderson. He's a graduate of Berkeley Law School. For those of you that do not know, he's one who's the father of the modern prison reform industry that we see going on. He used to visit Pelican Bay and other prisons and complained about the overcrowding. He originally overturned Prop 209, affirmative action, but then he was overruled by the Supreme Court. We're going to be sponsoring him in conjunction with San Jose State this Thursday night. I beseech you to please come out and be supportive, to get some understanding of what needs to continually happen here in policing. And I really need your support, and I'm looking forward for your support. Next, accountability and justice. Again, I'm going to say this, according to one of my favorite people, James Baldwin. I love America more than any other country in this world. And exactly for that reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. I will criticize this country because I love this country. I am a military brat. Again, I am unashamedly Black and unapologetically beautiful. You are unashamedly whatever you may be, and you have a right to be beautiful for that. We have a right to coexist and live in this country together. It's time for America to face its original sin and begin the healing process so all of us can fulfill the democratic experience in which we are part of. I will now take questions.
All right, so yeah, so Reverend Moore, do you think we're like at an inflection point given the Capitol insurrection and what happened there? I mean, in our lifetime, we've never seen like that. I think the last time the Capitol was attacked was going all the way back to the War of 1812, and we didn't even see. I don't even think it was ever invaded during the Civil War. So, what's your thoughts about where we are in historical context? And this being the Democratic Party, how do you feel? How do you feel the Democratic Party is in terms of civil rights and so forth with the new president?
Well, thank you for the question. And for the country and this nation and for the world, our underbelly was completely opened up. And if we go back to the flood of New Orleans, it's been slowly ripping, opening, and showing all the scars and the wrongness that is the ingest in our systems. And we cannot continue to ignore them and act like they does not exist. It's time for us to look at this cancer that is inside of us. For those of us in the summer who watched the demonstrations and we saw the overarmed and overreactive, I was there May 29th in downtown San Jose. I was in the front with the kids when we sat. I was in the front when we kneeled, and the police were the aggressors. The police began to push. And so when you look at what happened at the Capitol and you notice that the police opened up the gates, police opened up the barriers. But when you take a deeper dive and understand, not only did the FBI and other security forces known that there was hate groups marching on and coming to the Capitol and did nothing, we have to begin to overhaul that complete system. There's a problem. So even if you read the Guardian newspaper, you could Google the Guardian newspaper and the FBI knowledge of white supremacist group and police departments. They know it exists. They know that they are there. And it's time for us to examine and start like the CLEAR Act, in which Ash Carla will be bringing forth, as we have supported that, to begin to examine our police departments and rid ourselves of any hate affiliations that these departments have in them immediately. And so that's it. So we've seen it. So those of you like me who have dealt with some of the dreadest diseases in this country from family members and others, know that if you don't begin to treat it, it will ravage the whole body and we will eventually die.
Yeah. So, Diane, we don't have any questions, right, from the floor yet?
That's right. I'd like to take the minute to remind our audience, now is a good time to start formulating those questions. Type them in using the QA button on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and let's get some answers from two questions.
John had somebody named John Pritton has his hand up.
John Petrin?
Petrin, yes.
I just unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
When I click on the Q&A button, I get no open questions.
Oh, that's because you're in a panelist category.
Okay.
So go ahead and open your video, John.
Okay.
And ask your question or make a comment.
I just had a question for you, sir.
Yeah.
You packed a lot into your presentation there, and I was wondering where you grew up and what were the significant influences that pushed you in this important direction in your life, besides, say, Dr. King.
Well, first of all,
tell us about that.
Yes, I got that. It's so interesting. I'm a service brat, born in Norfolk, Virginia, and my father was a YNC non-commissioned officer in the early nuclear Navy. So I guess as a young kid, seeing some of the things that we faced when we came back and forth here to Mountain View and watching him, kids were always watching our fathers, and so we heard it. Inspiration will always be the prophet. Well, Dr. King will always play a role in that. But even so, I'm a lover of Frederick Douglass, and Frederick Douglass said, I'd asked the question, if he could tell a young man anything anything to do, give him any advice. He says, agitate, agitate, agitate. And so sometimes I have ran into confrontations with my style or my approach, because I believe to be direct and to the point, and agitate. And John, I'm sure that you or your wife or someone in your home has that beautiful Whirlpool washing machine sitting in there, and then the number one cycle in there is agitate, to get the dirt out the clothes. And so we have to agitate to get the dirt out. It's not to be hurtful sometimes, but it's understand that when I start talking and I get emotional, I move my hand, people say he's agitating or he's not acting unprofessional. No, that's some of the Black actually some of our Black tradition or that we still have connected to in a spiritual realm that some people don't understand sometimes.
I have a question that's come into our Q&A. This is, who can we write to in order to support HR 40?
Let's start with a local, then we move up to our up to the state, and then let's write this our state representative, whoever your national representative is. If it's I'm trying to see what's his name, just got moved, but I'm trying to think of my representative over here. I can't remember her name right now, but we know who our Democratic representatives up at the state capitol are. Write them and tell them they must get out and support immediately, and we must support this and not just study. And California has its own study, but it's time for us, right? The Black legislator here in California, but it's time for California to say, how can we do it? I worked so hard. What was his name? The second governor of California, who used to have the Exclusion Act, who wrote the Chinese Exclusion Act. Also, when we understand that we just changed the name of the school to the Loney School that is over on Heading. But that governor, he had actually said there would be no Blacks allowed in California, as well as Oregon. And we must understand that when Blacks originally came to this state, we were only allowed to live out in Palmdale, Bakersfield, out in the desert to pick cotton and to pick fruit. And you must understand that it wasn't until the migration that we came into LA during World War II to work in the shipyards. We have to look at all the zoning laws that are passed, and even currently the redlining history of Santa Clara County that has forbidden my father, as a matter of fact, who could have possibly bought a home in Los Gatos, but the only loan he would get was to put him over in East Side. So we have to begin to look at all those laws that are passed or still on the book or present to make changes.
So Reverend Moore, I'm curious about the reparations. So I know we've had some history during the civil rights era of affirmative action and things like that. Obviously, it didn't go far enough. What would the specifics be if the country did vote for reparations for Blacks under slavery and so forth?
Yeah, that is always interesting. My brothers who are Asian or Japanese descent, I believe some of them got money, and I believe that indigenous people here, they got land and right to have the land. That's where we got all the casinos now. They're doing pretty well there, as well as I'm gonna look at our Jewish brothers and sisters. They were also given, So I believe some type of monetary compensation, and exactly what that would look like, is very unique to understand, because some people I wouldn't want to give a whole lump sum of money to, because they'd be irresponsible for it, and it may lead to other things. But if it's something that would help with education, help with getting us to the place in our communities, because like I say, I've lost my home. You can never replace the taxes I pay and what my home is worth now. That'd be great if I could get that replaced, But how do we reestablish that for all the wrongs that this country has continually done and continually does to Black people? That's why I say we need to study it, and it should be some form of monetary restitution that would either be used for them to attend college or universities. I remember when I first came out of college, even here, so I'm kind of slow on that one, but I was able to attend not only Ohlone College, where I played football, and we won the Northern California Small College Championship. So I thought I was ready for the big time, and I came home and I found out these kids were bigger and stronger than me on Division A, right? So, but I was able to go to Evergreen Valley College, and all I had to pay was for $5 for a health card. So we must get to a point where we can get back, so that college wouldn't be a point, but helping us in the housing, helping us take back control of the communities and all the negativity and Black communities or brown communities We see all the deprived living situation. We must do away with slumlords. And there are so many things that we can correct.
So,
The housing.
Reverend Moore, what I hear you talking about is some way of combating institutional racism.
That's what is institutional and structural racism. Even I'm fighting with it today here at our police department. As they say, we're going through a nice hiring process. And I said, really, if we were going to hire someone from the inside, we should have just said we're looking for inside candidates. And you guys will probably get the news tomorrow. Well, now they found out that one of the candidates, Officer Mata, had a previous shooting that normally San Jose PD doesn't release people's records, but for some reason, as a minority, his record got released, which will probably try to drum up people not to support him to be a police chief. So these are some of the structural and institutional racism issues that come up when there's two different levels or ways that a person of color has to achieve in order to get the job.
Diane, I see we have a question from our president of the Martin Luther King Society, Sam Brown.
Yes. So Reverend Moore, I thank Sam Brown for this question. He's asking, what are 3 things that we can do locally, immediately, and as a senior living in the villages to address some of the issues that you have expressed?
Wow, Sam. Well, Sam, one that won't be one is to join me Thursday night and hear from Judge Henderson. Judge Henderson started off his career investigating or checking out Dr. King for the Justice Department. And if you don't know Judge Henderson, he ended up losing his job because he loaned his car to Martin Luther King when he couldn't arrive. And so he went up to there for his free in the prison. So that's a great point. But what we need here in Santa Clara County is one, Sam, is that I'm really frustrated with, and I'm not knocking any organization or any group of people, but you know that we've had this Afro Center here on 6th of Julian, which is okay. I'm not knocking the people there or the organization there. What I'm saying is they have built buildings for the Vietnamese culture and other cultures, all have these magnificent buildings, and we still don't have a building. And so there's a reason why we've been here since the 50s or 30s, right? Do you know the way to San Jose? But still, there is no significance markers for us here in San Jose. Despite the fact of Speed City came from San Jose, which won the Olympics and was part of the start and the kickoff of the civil rights movement with Tommy and John Carlos. There is no great monument that the city or county has put up for them. It's something on San Jose State campus, yes. As far as Andre Phillip and Millard Hampton are track people. So yes. So are there some places that they can start helping people, I would say even that have a certain category such as myself, to recruit and to obtain a Black culture here. There's no real cultural place for us. There's very few restaurants. What I would say, San Jose needs a museum. But as far as I mentioned, and what we can do for San Jose is one, is start looking for more political representation. I recently sat on a hiring panel for a position here in the county, and a Black guy did come through, and he had some of the highest marks, and everybody could agree. But the question came back, can he prove it? We as a county and people must look at the systemic structures and begin to answer the question, why do we have 10 companies in Santa Clara County who do not have any Black women working for them? Nevertheless, Black women hold the highest advanced degrees of any ethnic or racial group in this nation. Why is it that so many of our companies here in Santa Clara County do not have Black leadership? Why aren't we at any of the CBO or executive levels in management in so many companies outside of Rick Callender at the Santa Clara Valley Water District? Why at the Santa Clara Valley Water District, 2 of its sitting board members are after him about a past criminal record, or they're looking for a past criminal record on him to prosecute him or to keep him to be disqualified? We have to ask that question, why in the systems of Santa Clara County, in a county that's democratically run, are there so many disproportionately institutions affecting Black and brown people? Why? Why, if we are really lovers of people, and we must remember, President Johnson one time says, if we put this civil rights bill in, that Blacks will vote democratically for the rest of our lives. And I'm going to tell the Democratic Party that's in front of me now, unless you fulfill raise the minimum wage across this nation for everybody to $15 an hour immediately, unless you give a child care for all the people in this country and in this state immediately, unless you begin to look at reparations for Black people immediately. So all of what we've gained just this year by booting him out the office will be lost in 4 years, and if not 2 years, on this upcoming election. So we do need to pay attention to the election coming up in 18 months or so, whatever, in Georgia, as I do plan on having myself in position to support those in Georgia's and the re-election. And we must pass a Voter Rights Act for a national policy. So those, Sam, are some of the things locally we can get involved in. And you should all become members of the San Jose Silicon Valley NAACP immediately. I implore you to get a lifetime membership or just a $30 membership and help us push the ball forward, because together we can make things better.
Where, how would we do that, Reverend? Is there, where do we send it to? And your $30 would be for an annual membership for the year? Is that how it works? Is it
Yeah, 30.
lifetime? The lifetime would be how much?
This lifetime is $750, and the $30 is a yearly membership. You can go to San Jose NAACP website, or you can go to, or you can send it to us in mail at 1313 North Milpitas Boulevard, Suite 163, Milpitas, California, 95035. And we'll process it, like I say, with the young way or the golden way, you know, if you're not familiar with all those, all these new devices to pay bills.
And then if you join, is there a way of participating? Is there like, are they doing Zoom meetings now, or
We meet
when you have monthly meetings? How does it work?
We meet monthly, every fourth Thursday, except on a holiday. And all my meetings, some of my executive committee get upset with me, but all of my meetings are open to the community, because I like to be transparent as possible. And so we need your help for your expertise. And you guys live in the villages, or have a unique opportunity and a possibility to show and still guide the young heads and the young people coming up. And so many of you might have been part of the 60s crowd, you know, when we were really progressive, we were moving the ball in the right direction. And if you remember, they took away all the leaders of that movement. They disqualified them, locked them up, or whatever happened to them. Now we have a time when we see that the grave disease of racism is rooted in our government and in our political structures, such as representing the Republican Party. And let me be very frank, my vice president, Bob Nunez, is the former chair of the Santa Clara County Republican Party.
Wow.
So we have often pushed him, and so I have room for anybody that wants to come in and join, because I do not have all the answers, but I do need all the support to get work done.
Reverend, I've got a question on police reform. Do you see any advantages to potential police reform in Silicon Valley that might be beneficial?
Yes, again, I would say when we say redirect, I say redirect instead of defund. Redirect the funding and to other sources, and to mental health response units specializing in responding to police. Instead of calling 911 and getting the police and someone responds with a gun and a handgun or whatever, or other tactics, they're not adequately trained or sufficient. One must ask the question, why do we like the fire truck when it shows up, but hate the police car when it shows up? Fire department has a knowledge of saving lives, versus police are often, you know, people fear them because they have such a reputation of taking lives in this country. And when we look at the history of policing, which was started based upon slave patrols or Indian frontier patrols. And at that time, they could bring back the captive or the native any way they wanted, as long as they brought him in, as the sign used to say, dead or alive. And in some factions, that is still the way policing is done in America today. There's two sets of laws, and we saw it when the shooting over at Mother Bethel in North Carolina, how the white victim was brought in, or the white suspect was brought in and fed a hamburger. But when a black person is arrested, his knees on his neck, and it's for a $20 bill. It's two different treatments, and we have to deal with that as a nation. So our police department needs to repurpose, put money in after-school programs, child care programs, or even in education, and I would say in summer jobs for youth, because what made Santa Clara County so unique in the 70s when I was growing up around here was the fact that in between summer school and football practice, I was able to always have a summer job. So there was no time for me to get into shenanigans, because I was always working and always received credit for it in school. So then I would roll right into football and right back into school. But now we don't have programs in this housing, situation is going to be the death of us.
So I'd like to take a minute and notify the audience that if you'll look in your chat window, you would also on the bottom of your screen, you'll see that there's some references that have been placed there by Tony Berg. So if you're looking for resources, click on some of those links and copy down some information that you can use later to make your move. Thank you.
Yeah, Reverend Moore, I just wanted to comment. To me, I mean, I just saw recently this videotape of this fellow that was murdered while jaywalking. I was just, I was dumbfounded because here we've had so many incidents in the last 5 years. And it's like, how could they not realize to arrest a guy for, who would ever be thought of to be arrested for jaywalking? I've never been arrested for jaywalking. And obviously I was never targeted. Like, he was obviously targeted. And the other white cop said to him, I don't think this is a good idea. But then he wound up assaulting him as well. I was like, go on. It's a mentality that I just can't believe. I can only share with you that, you know, we talked about being in the military. I know John is ex-military, I am too. I was part of a movement in 1969 where they passed human goals. And they completely transformed the way, you know, diversity was taught in the military. I was part of that. And I can't say the military was perfect, but I think in the 7 years that they attempted to retrain, re-educate, it made a huge difference. I mean, it was start from the top and went all the way down. Everybody was involved in it. And I think something like that across all our police forces is really absolutely necessary, including like minority history, a history of oppression, racial awareness. What do you think?
Well, I would agree, but as Bob, you don't understand a studious in the history, you know that the 369th Infantry out of New York City at the end of World War I, one of the most decorated groups of all time in the military, when many of those soldiers came back from World War I, weren't allowed to march on streets. Actually, some of them were hung while they were in uniform as they returned to the South.
Right.
So the fact that this nation, or we act like we're shocked about what we see today, is something from the Black community when we understand NAACP was founded based upon a man was lynched almost every day. So this stuff we cannot pretend like we didn't know it was there. And as I said before, one of my favorite comedians of all time is Richard Pryor, and that had to be in the 70s when he said, "Can the police, LA police, have something in the book in the manual says you can kill an N-word?" And yes, they have been killing us as citizens for years. And so when I don't say you guys please take it personally, but when you say that you're shocked, we expected. You know, and so when people say, well, why did he run? He shouldn't have ran. Well, it becomes, if you know that when you see them, you either can get away from them or you're going to be beat to death. You're going to be accused of you done something wrong. If you try to pull away from them, they're going to say that you resisted arrest. They're going to beat you. Then they're going to charge you with the felonious crimes. And one thing I want to point out with the Washington excursion is that group of Proud Boys or whoever they might have been, none of them have been hit with gang enhancements. See, Black kids are so often hit with gang enhancements, which would make their charges and their sentences longer for simple crimes. But yet these white citizens, we've seen them storm the building and not get gang enhancements. We've seen Black kids sitting on the corner and assault somebody, and they end up with gang enhancements. So we as a California, we can speak for California. We need to make sure that we have equal treatment under the law according to the Constitution. And if that's not happening, we need to do what's necessary to change it. So historically, this country has had this sinful problem in it. And historically, it's time for us to deal with it. And an apology and reparations will only be the start. The fact that we have a hard time getting ethnic studies in schools is why not? And when I say that, Bob, I say ethnic studies or world history should be taught, a true world history, and not this fantasy of American history that we painted that it was only the Europeans that conquest and made everything here, when that's not the story. When it was the diversity of this country that has actually built this country and what this country is established on. And we must recognize all of our people's contributions to this nation and not just celebrate one. So when we said that the Star Spangled Banner is not for something for us, you just read the lyrics. We're not being disrespectful to it. We're telling you what the lyrics say. Why is everybody upset? Why were so many people in this county upset about Kaepernick kneeling, which is the most humble position a person can take, and then don't have that same upsetness with what happened at the Capitol? The police unions nailed us over kneeling, but the police unions have been silent about the onslaught of the Capitol. That's institutional and structural racism at its extreme. And no one is holding our local police unions accountable for their lack of inaction or lack of condemnation on what happened at the nation's capital.
Thank you for that. It's about 2:54 p.m. If you're still sitting out there with a question on your mind, please submit it right away. We're going to start coming to closure here. And I want to remind the audience that there is an opportunity. If you've got some time and you want to have a conversation with Reverend Moore, you'll want to raise your hand using the toggle switch, which is on the bottom of your screen. Raise your hand. On some people's computers, you might find it under the tab for participants. There might be some options there. So if you're interested in sticking around for a little while and talking with Reverend Moore, please let us know that now. Thank you.
So Reverend Moore, I have a question for you. You've been president of the NAACP here for 7 years. What have you observed? What are like your greatest lessons learned as being the president of the organization? What have you learned about yourself and also about, where we're at here in San Jose?
Well, where we're at in San Jose, I think sometimes we're not what we want to perceive ourselves as being. We want to perceive San Jose, Santa Clara County as this great melting pot where everyone can come in and be successful, and that's not the case.
Right.
We have seen over the recent years the great flight of reverse migration of Blacks out of this valley, and I believe that's only going to increase in the coming years as rent is high and there's no jobs that are paying a retirement benefits,
Yeah.
So the cost of living is going to really drive a lot of this. So I believe the reverse migration is in effect, that we will be leaving. And like I say, I told you I'm a Star Trek guy, and I forget which movie it was. There were no whales on Earth, and they had to go search for whales in order to save the planet Earth. At some point, Santa Clara County will begin to look for Black people to be here because so many of us will have left. Because there's nothing here that really grounds us here culturally. And if you weren't fortunate enough to buy a home years ago, you darn near can't afford a home. Because me and my wife struggle. If we were to get another home at $800,000, if we could pay the house note, we could never pay the taxes on the land.
Right.
So how does it happen? So what is this affordable housing that they keep talking about? And affordable is understandably, what do you consider affordable? Opportunities here that we've missed. I thought we had a chance to, in between Santa Clara County and Morgan Hill. I love Greenland and I love open space. I understand that, but I thought we had an opportunity to develop housing that would be solar and a wind only, and build a modern part of San Jose in that, because we would have still been encircled from Milpitas all the way back over to Milpitas Hill, all the way down to South County, where it all burned up this past summer. Was beautiful land out there, beautiful lakes out there, beautiful ponds, beautiful open space. We are surrounded by a green belt. So I thought that we should have built there. I am frustrated with the Democratic Party and my best friend, and I'm gonna call her my best friend, Supervisor Cindy Chavez, and the attempts to build affordable housing on Reed Hillview Airport. Yes, we need housing, but we need housing today. And my suggestion has long been, why don't we build on the Mount Pleasant Golf Course that is vacant? It is not, land is not polluted. We could build on that land tomorrow. We could be shovel ready, buy it and be shovel ready, or make a deal and transfer it. Reed Hillview, we could still chop it in half. And they say they wanted to land helicopters, the vertical flight. We could still look at that option. I also suggested that we know that the malls, whether we like the malls or not, malls are going the way of of like Greyhound bus transportation, right? So how come we don't take that same land that's Oak Ridge and Westfield, who have now put those malls up for sale, and immediately began looking at how we can make Santana's rolls out of them and put housing and development in that, which would not change the geographic, would not change the foot or the imprint. So I get in trouble from my best friend Cindy, because for my point, and I tell her I have no ties to Reed Hillview Airport, or none of the rich people who own planes out there. When I have flown with my friends out of an airport, we fly out of Morgan Hill and they take me for a ride or something. So my point is, they say pollution, but I understand those airports are all interconnected for various reasons since World War II. And that, yes, we could remodify them and use them, but I suggest that we put football, soccer fields, other athletic fields that are affordable for the community, because one of the highest costs for our communities of color is to play for athletics. So something that could be self-generated, that people can go there and get a workout, and they can have indoor, outdoor soccer and other training facilities are massive. And just my last part of that is San Jose Police Department wants to build a new substation, police station, and training facilities over on land on Hellier Park area. I'm like, again, that's a place we could immediately put some housing for families right now that will offset it, because as much as you might love your grandkids and everybody else, unless you have a big lump sum of money, your children will not be able to afford to live here unless they're rocket scientists.
Reverend, we've got a question from Nan Holmes. Nan?
Reverend, I have seen a woman by the name of Heather McGee, who I guess is with Demos, and she's been on TV recently, particularly MSNBC, and she's written a book called The Sum of Us. And I will confess right out that I haven't read it, but she apparently very carefully lays out how when one group suffers, everyone suffers financially. And I just, I wondered if you had known anything about the book. And she's gotten basically rave reviews from Chris Hayes, and who said about her that she really has detailed how, if, for example, Blacks do badly, everybody does badly. So I just, well, I don't know what you can say to that, but maybe you could comment.
Well, I have not read the book, to be honest, but I will tell you this. Called The Canaries in the Cave, and the Cave, right? And so when the canaries start to die off, you know there's death coming. When they start to leave, when you start seeing minorities or to see the Black community start to leave, to look for other places to live, not behind us are going to be the other ethnic groups and other people, because people will be pushing to survive. And as I joyfully or playfully play with my wife, I'm like, if these big companies are leaving Santa Clara County, why would we stay here? If they're telling you they're having a hard time recruiting, we can't recruit a new national police officer, because even if we offer them $300,000 a year to come here and buy a home is out and eat up the salary. So we have said our greatest success is going to be the downfall for us, because where the working class citizens are going to live in these neighborhoods. When we say we want to get everybody back to school, and why I push back on sending us back to school and education, is because many of our homes on Story, McKee, and Alum Rock, the traffic flow never stopped. These people are living impacted in order to survive. 2 families, 3 families in a house. So that's why the COVID-19 cases are so high. And so our greatest success and the cost of our land, unless we start building and putting more land, our greatest is going to be the destruction, and people are going to leave, and we're not going to be able to recruit talent. And I'm not saying this in a disrespectful manner. Our golden harvesters or the golden villagers, unless your family inherits your place, even your kids can't buy it, you know. And so and 20 years in a lifetime, when they leave or whatever, at $1.5 million, $2 million for a home, the average citizen cannot afford it. So we priced ourselves out of it. We're an average person. So even if you're buying rental property now, who's making that kind of money to pay that rent? And some of this is very simple. So that's why I'm saying immediately start looking into the Bryan at Oak Ridge and Westfield Mall, and put some dense housing on there, and right there, East Ridge is vital because it has the rapid transit, and of course my good friend, I love Cindy, you guys. It's not that I don't love Cindy and the family. If you know family, you can argue and fight with them and still tell them you love them. But Cindy And she says, well, the planes can't land if we build up. Well, build down and they'll build up around it. But we have to address this not in 10 years when they want to get rid of the airport, but we have to address this housing issue now, or the masses of people on low income, because I'm sad to admit this in front of all of you, according to this state, unless you're making $200 and some thousand as a family of four, you are in the poverty level. So I looked at that and they said, I'm on the poverty level. I'm too poor to really afford to live here. So what are they saying to me? You know, I get one of my best friends, one of my good supporters helps me keep my kids in sports and other activities, or I couldn't pay the cost. So you got to figure, if you don't have that connection, there are families across this city and county, and you wonder why the youth are out not doing anything. They can't afford to get the soccer league. They can't afford to put them in these programs because of the cost associated. So again, our greatest success will be the greatest failure sometime down the road unless it's addressed immediately.
Right. Could you also answer me a question that I should probably know the answer to, but what percentage of the Santa Clara County population is African American?
Well, and that's shocking. Recently, I guess the most recent census, when I looked at it, said we were right around, they say 3% or 2.9%. So I believe it's probably less than that. And a lot of that might have to be done, that's with the Africans that have come here. And again, so we're under 3%. I can speak for Eastside Union High School District. At one time, we had about 2,200 African Americans in the Height. And now currently the Eastside Union High School District, in which the Villages lives in, we're under 1,000 students in our district. So I'll let you be the judge of that. So some of the Black families of Black people who are moving here, or other ethnic groups who are moving here, they are deciding not to have kids. So you'll be looking up at the Evergreen and other school districts looking to close their schools because they don't have enough students to fill it, because people can't afford to live here and have families. That's problematic. You know, so so when you say the problem, this is the beginning of the problem when families don't have kids, right? So now we're going to have all these buildings but don't have enough students. So then the teachers, why was a teacher come here if we can't afford to live here? You know, and you know, why then we don't want to give the teachers a raise. We don't want to give the essential workers a raise. That was an embarrassment not to give the essential workers that kept the stores open for us during this pandemic, putting their lives on the line. If you serve in the military, you get sent overseas, you get hazardous pay. But right here, people making $100,000, $200,000, our city council people, some of them voted not to give people a raise. When we know that the minimum wage at $15 had not been raised in over 50 years, it was down under $5 and $6 an hour. 50 years, but we raised rent and everything else up quadrupled, but we won't give a living wage. There is something greedy that's going on in America that is going to be the death of America if she does not change her ways. And that's just, I love this place, right? I really do. And so do I fly to Belize and live off my retirement in a foreign country where I can afford to actually have a life? You know, we came to California because the education was good here in California. Now California education system is down by the bottom. Why should anybody come here? Why should a talented person, a minimum wage working person, come here or stay here when we have nothing to offer but high taxes and high housing? So that's my concern. You know, that is, but I was text me in 5 years and see if I was right, if it continues. And so we must remember, I have family that's in Detroit, and Detroit was prosperous and doing great, and you could live in Dearborn and all parts of Detroit, nice housing. But when the auto industry crashed, what happened with Detroit?
It died. That's where I moved from, was the Detroit area.
So you know, Detroit, Midland, Saginaw, you know that everything just kaploop and went in. And what else can happen here if we're no longer attracting electronic companies? Apple is opening up a place in Atlanta, Georgia. Kia Motors is opening a place in West Point, Georgia. So everyone is opening up places in other parts of the state, Arizona and Texas. Is something going on, and as Democratic people, we need to look at this and begin to address this housing situation and supporting getting people in housing. Because even if they offered me some programs, they still expect me to come up with $35,000. So it'll take me how many years to say X, Y, and Z thousands of dollars and to fit your program. And you're only going to have 4 or 5 units available for me to qualify for.
Okay, Reverend, I think we're getting closer to the close here. I loved your energy. Wow, you went for like rapid pace there. Covered like 50 issues in I have to digest a little bit, like I'm sure, but it was a
Man,
good appetite wetter, so I really appreciate it.
you know, like I said, just put your seatbelts on, because we as Democrats, we have a moral responsibility.
Yeah.
And if we're going to save this democracy, those Democrats in Arizona and Montana who are wavering on this living wage and wavering on the act for childcare, you have to understand 55% of the Americans who voted for the Democratic Party voted based upon getting that living wage. And if we fall back on that, and if we don't hold Biden and Harris feet to the fire, we will see him again. Believe you me, they're fighting tooth and nail to keep him eligible. And as I want to say this again, as Georgia prepares to install all these voting restrictions, we must be very, very,
I agree.
you know, so that's all. I'm sorry.
Well, we got one party, the other party doesn't believe in democracy, basically. That's my opinion.
And they're gangster about it. And I'm sorry to say that the Democratic Party has to become more gangster. You saw how Mitch McConnell would just change the rules and do whatever he wants because he had the power. Right now, we got a 50-50 vote, and every time there's a tie, just bring Harris in and vote the tie through. We must shovel it through to get the processes in place for America can experience what it's really like. And that's those poor folks in Appalachia and other white parts where white people think, or they're bought into this thing that because how they get us to fight for the pieces of pie, we must understand that all of us are equal to this pie, and we don't have to fight for it if we are fed and take care of. Right? I'm sorry, but that's
right on, brother. All right, we got to bring this to a close. And Diane, any closing thoughts, or Tony, anything you guys want to say before?
Yeah, I do have one, which is in the chat box. There are references that have been included there. So if you're looking for a place to get some more information, the address for the San Jose NAACP in Milpitas is now listed there. So copy down these references for future notice. And I believe that, Tony, would you confirm about the number of people who have asked to remain late and spend some time with chatting?
I don't see anybody. I think we are saturated with information. It's flown through so quickly.
Excellent. Well, then we'll consider this the official close of today's program. Thank you, audience, for being with us today. This was very informative, and I think we all learned a little something.
Absolutely. Thank
Thank
you
you very much, Reverend Moore.
Reverend. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
audience.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless.
So audience, if you're wondering how do you leave a Zoom meeting, use your mouse and go to the screen. The lower right-hand corner, you'll see a red box that says leave. You click on that and it will exit you from the Zoom screen. Thank you again for being here. It's a happy tune.
Yes.
We got plenty of nothing.
Wow, Reverend, that was just amazing.
Wow. You're right about putting on your seatbelt. That was
I'm sorry, but I hope it was okay. I hope it was okay.
No, do not apologize.
energy.
That's the kind of energy I think it's important for a message.
Yeah, we
All
don't
that
quite
passion.
have that same level of energy at our age, but.
Well, thank you.
So Tony, I think that looks like all the participants have gone except for the four of us, correct?
Yes, it's just us girls together now.
Just us girls.
But that was overpoweringly impressive, Reverend Moore. I mean, I'm gobsmacked. It was really very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me again.
Very, very good.
Hopefully we supported you properly and you didn't feel uncomfortable in the environment we created for you.
How was it for you, Reverend?
I just hope I was clear. You know, like I said, I get accused of getting excited, and
Yep.
I just want to tell you guys I love this country, and I love humanity. And it wasn't, not wasn't, but one time I got sick. I was really sick, right? And I had done that. What was it called? The test when they check you for cancer, and you go in and You have to get the snippets when they cut you
For the biopsies.
biopsies, and they gave me the shot. I got sick, and I told the doctor I didn't feel well, and I regurgitated, right? And he said, "Oh, okay, well, you'll be all right." And I went home, and then I noticed that some days later I kept having a lot of blood in my stool,
Ah,
a day or two. So I went back down there and told him, "Hey man, something's wrong. I'm not feeling well." And so when they did a check on me, my blood pressure was really low. And then they set me in a wheelchair and they rolled me over to emergency room, and come to find out I was losing blood, and they did not know where I was losing blood or what was causing me to lose blood, But so they had to give me a blood transfusion, right? And so they turned me upside down so I wouldn't lose any more blood out of my head. And they started putting blood plasma into me. And I tell everyone always this story because I didn't ask them whose blood it was.
yeah,
I just that it was a match.
yeah,
And when we look at it, that's all we want to do. We're all human by
Yeah.
nature.
Yeah.
Whether you believe in God or you believe in evolution, whatever, we all have the same parts in our body. And we all have Maslow's hierarchy of needs that we want for our families. That's a common thread that we all have and everybody fights for. And yes, in my community in particular, there are some forms of post-traumatic slave syndrome where you have to figure all these years of doing this, all these years of not being treated equal, and the fear of police runs deep in the communities.
Yeah.
And I tell people when I was pledging once, and the San Jose PD showed up at the house we were pledging, and they went to Rosses, so opened up the garage, come out. And when the garage opened, they came out, and I recognized one of the voices from one of the guys I played football with, right? But the kids who were from LA, they took off running because their engagement with police was to run. So their first thing was to run. And I'm standing there having the conversation, and I'm like, and Ray Gonzalez said, "Jeff, why are they all running?" I said, "I don't know." But see, the policing in LA was different then than what it was here.
Yeah.
And I had an encounter with the police here where they took beer from me when I was in high school, and they made me pour it out, and they called my mom. But the experience in LA was totally different. What we have to do is get back to excuse me, that policing that I experienced when I was young, where the cop took the beer and said, "I'm going to call your mom." That was more punishment than putting me in juvenile hall. And see, now we have a system where we criminalize youthful behavior.
Yeah.
And so then we start them down this track that once they're marked, they're put in this category, and they never break out of that category.
I hear you. It's terrible.
And that's what we have to fight against. And we have to look at that. And so when we look at the prison industrial complex, and we wonder how many kids are in there for possession of, we made a joke, Leon Spinks recently died, but Leon Spinks was sentenced to a jail term for what we jokingly said was 50 cents worth of cocaine in the package when he opened it. And when a white guy gets caught for that with cocaine, there's no sentencing. Or when a white kid on a high school campus is caught with marijuana or drugs, the white student is given counseling because the parent in Los Gatos or San, one of the counties, affluent counties up there, can afford counseling. Where the black kid is sent to juvenile hall, or the brown kid is sent to juvenile hall. Exact same frequency. So we have to do what we have to do in order to make sure there's equal treatments. And a lot of times, that equal treatment means we have to say ouch, and we have to ask why is there disproportionate treatment?
Yeah, I know.
And so I'm sorry. So again, when I talk about, Biden needs to pass that $50,000 to relieve debt from students as he promised. But when he says, well, people at Harvard and people at these exclusive universities, first you have to be exclusive to get in there. First, you have to have money. And a lot of people who sometimes don't qualify to get in there, George Bush, as we said, his father had the money and the clout to get him in there. So for him to run into a debt is not even reasonable to consider. What we're talking about, those people who are going to San Jose State, who are going to other universities, we need to help relieve the debt, because a lot of the young people cannot speak, because whether we want to admit it or not, it's a form of indentured servitude. Because once they graduate from college, now they're focused on paying back that debt.
I know exactly what you're saying, Reverend.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, but I get excited about these things because some of it I'm like,
you're a preacher.
But it's right in front of us, and it's like if you see the issue in front of you, it's like you have to begin to question yourself why, And if we love democracy right now here in California, we have a Democratic-led Senate, and we're watching them want to recall our current governor. I'm saying, what a waste of energy. You want to call him for the failed tactics of a Republican president for not getting the spread out and for closing down the businesses. I don't want to see the businesses closed.
Right.
But as a health measure, we must do everything possible and do that. So the question is not that they were closed, but the question is, how can we help them get back to where they were pre-pandemic? That's what the conversation should be about, and not trying to get the man for those issues.
Gotcha.
Wow.
All right. Tony, any thoughts?
I have all the information